I think, maybe. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and we will be doing politics this evening because we have as our guest Chris Robling, who's a former politician, former and perhaps current pundit, certainly current in public relations with Jane Thompson and Associates. He is a principal. They do litigation support and crisis management, but they do so much more. And the reason why Chris can excel at that, and we can say that, is because he spent his life in government. Well, it's not his life in government, but he's done a good chunk of government, director of communications for the CTA, WBEZ, Chicago Public Radio, longtime program host, interviewing such notables as Henry the K. Kissinger and Dr. Henry Kissinger, Mike Royko, and many, many more, recently reporting, commenting on the National Republican Convention in St. Paul, doing that for WGN. So, Chris, you know a tremendous amount of just about everything, politics and public policy. It would be really easy if you could just give me like 5 quick reasons why John McCain lost the presidential race.
John McCain had no strategy. John McCain freaked out on the 15th of September when there was an economic crisis, and I thought that he was actually suspending his campaign and he had a sense of what he was going to do. I think what the public saw, rightly or wrongly, ultimately, was that he didn't know what to do. I think that at that time a gap opened between Obama and McCain that was never overcome. Number 3, I don't think that the McCain campaign had the simplest idea of how to benefit from a Sarah Palin, and that is a terrible loss for McCain and also for Palin, although I think she could come back from that. Number 4, I think that McCain completely failed on opposition research, so he never really knew what to say about Barack Obama. And number 5, to give you 5, he failed to define Barack Obama when it was appropriate to do so, which I, sort of looking back with the benefit of 2020 hindsight, think was probably in the 3 weeks or so of August prior to the Democratic convention. I think that's when he should have gone on TV. That's when he should have defined Obama, so that at the convention, Obama and the Democrats would have been somewhat off their game having to explain and describe.
So it sounds kind of what I would expect from somebody who's spent a good part of his career in the media and in public relations and communications. What you're telling me, he didn't tell people what he was about.
I don't think to this day we have a real sense of the meat on the bones of, say, some of his catchphrases, maverick and reform and you will know their names. I mean, he came out with these phrases, and I don't really recall there being specifics about, say, one program or one bureau or one office or department that would be reformed under the McCain microscope.
Well, less spending, he was opposed to earmarks, he became a believer in the Bush tax cuts, but reform, cleaner government, less corruption. He's a reformer in that sense. He could have done just that. He actually, if McCain had said what I just said, and they made a 30-second commercial out of that, that would have been better. And how much did Rick Davis pull down from this? I mean, we're talking millions of dollars, right? The grossest waste of money. They spent tens of millions of dollars, and they couldn't come up with one good commercial that represented why people should vote for John McCain and Sarah Palin. I mean, am I overstating that?
Well, I hate to say one, I don't claim to have seen every commercial, but I think that you are right. No commercial broke through the clutter. And they were dealing with a candidate who was sort of picture perfect in a Hollywood central casting office kind of sense. Number 2, incredibly articulate and incredibly smooth on TV, so unflappable, and somebody who was prepared to do very well in the debates. Where McCain, I think, did middling. I think he was sort of a C-minus debater.
I don't want to make the whole show about this, but in short, what it was, McCain was the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, hold on. I don't want to go that far, and I'll tell you why I don't want to go that far. Because for most of the year, McCain ran above the anticipated result for the generic Republican candidate. And for most of the year, Barack Obama ran below the generic result for a Democratic candidate. I just want
that was before they got to be running against each other. I mean,
well, no, that was up until September. I mean, throughout July and August. Yes, correct. People were not focusing.
Come on, after September 15th, the striking thing is McCain is 72, Obama's 47. Obama could pass for 40, McCain could pass for 80. That contrast is amazing. Huge. You cannot run an old man against a young, vigorous guy unless you can portray him as young and vigorous. Now, people don't want to say this about McCain, I think, in part because some of the reasons why he appears older is because of his physical disabilities coming out of being a POW.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to criticize that.
No.
But if you're being objective, you have to say that was a detriment, number one. Number two, he doesn't know a thing about economics. He made the mistake of admitting that. Having admitted that, perhaps he should have learned sometime. Number three, he had to disassociate himself from Bush. He thought, people said, if there was a Republican who could be different from Bush, who could more easily disassociate themselves, they thought it was McCain because he differed so much on so many important policies, on torture, initially on the tax cuts and so forth.
Agree.
But he had become a defender of the economic policy of Bush.
I agree.
But the opportunity he had, as you kind of pointed out, when you had the bailout, when you had all this economic turmoil in the financial sector, and then the bailouts, Obama was saying he was supporting it. Why would McCain say, I don't support that? And the reasons are because this is not going to work, this is not effective, this is not the way to go. He could have tied Obama to Bush, right?
I think that he had an opportunity to tie Obama to Bush, but to do that, okay, he had to know that economic situation cold. And I think the fact is that he wasn't prepared to stand up against the bailout after the first loss in the House of Representatives. And I want to go back to another point that
because
you
he
made.
wasn't because he didn't know economics cold, and he'd have to trust other people that they were right.
That's right. I mean,
and
I
so
think
he wanted to be conventional.
I think he saw the sort of the tide of opinion was going in direction of getting a program passed. I think after it lost the first time on the House floor, there was a sense of the next thing that comes up has to pass, and that's when it went from sort of what we say, perhaps apocryphally, 15 pages to 450 pages with all these earmarks.
Right.
And then he got cross-eyed with his earmark position. And I want to point out, I agree with you.
People were saying it had it passed. Why couldn't he stand up and say, no, it doesn't? We need to do some things. We need to,
Okay, I'll tell
and you
I'll
could
tell
articulate
you why.
what they are.
I'll tell you why, because after the first one did not pass, there was another stock market crash, and there was a sense that if it didn't pass the next time, no one knew what was on the other side of that vote.
We found out it passed, and you had a tremendous 35% decline.
I understand.
Why didn't somebody know this? Why didn't Marty Feldstein, who's supposed to be this smart conservative economist, supposed to be working for McCain from Harvard? My God, I got an ABD in economics and I haven't touched the subject in the last 25 years. I had this so much more right than Marty Feldstein, or Feldstein just went along with the group.
I think that
Is that what we're saying?
I think that it was unprecedented, and I think that whether you're Martin Feldstein or Paul Volcker or Alan Greenspan, I mean, everybody understood that we were creeping close to something called liquidity preference, and if you get to liquidity preference, then the actual internal credit mechanisms of the economy seize up.
Excuse me, but it's just a rehash of history. You might remember this in the at Chicago, we call it the Great Contraction. Everybody else says the Great Depression.
Right.
In the contraction, they had what they called a liquidity trap. This is what Keynes wrote about. He was wrong. He said, the government's trying, in the 30s,
right,
trying to pump more money into the system, but there's an insatiable demand. That was the liquidity trap. The more the supply of money, the more demand. Well, we found out long after Friedman studied this, 3 decades later, the money supply had been cut in a third by the government. There was no liquidity trap. And so the joke at the University of Chicago Business School became, on Friday afternoon, every week they had what they called a liquidity preference function.
right.
A joke became the policy of this country because John McCain doesn't know economics, and sad to say, I don't think Barack Obama does. So kids, if you're out there and you're at New Trier, or you're in Naperville, or you're in Hinsdale, or I don't care where, you're in the Chicago Public Schools, learn some economics, and you too could be in this position, and you could save the country a lot of trouble if you get to be president.
Well,
we got to go on. We got to go on. We got to go on to tell them how they get to be president. So we really do. Okay. The National GOP frontrunners for 2012.
Oh, 2012. You want to talk about 2012?
Real quick. Give me 3 or 4 good names.
Yeah, 2012 is 4 years from now.
We start early. This is how Obama got to be president. Look, he was on this set in 2001 and 2002. Obama was here in 2004.
All right.
Because he came on public affairs 5 times in those 4 years, he is president of the United States. You can take that to the bank and collect interest.
Okay.
Assuming they got bailed out. All right.
You
with me?
Are you asking me who's up?
Give me 3 names, 4 names.
Newt Gingrich, Sarah Palin.
He's gone, but go ahead. Sarah Palin.
No,
okay.
I think that Newt Gingrich right now is a person who represents a cohort within the party. And I think that makes him a contender. I'm not saying he's going to make it. I'm
Gingrich,
saying
Palin,
he's out
who
there.
else?
Oh, I think Bobby Jindal. Probably people are going to look closely at Bobby
Governor of
Jindal. He's the
Louisiana.
governor
Tell
of
us about him.
Louisiana. He is a very active, he's a former United States representative. He's one of these guys who believes in an efficacious government, not
Reform.
necessarily a big government.
He's cleaning up one of the most three most corrupt states in the country: Illinois, Louisiana, New Jersey.
I am big on
He's cleaning
saying
up
there are
Louisiana.
two types of Republicans: reformers and establishmentarians. And the reformers are in the ascendance in the party, I think, right now. And that is a legacy of John McCain, and I think he's going to add to that as he returns to the Senate.
Mitch Daniels, governor of Indiana, he won in the face of a big
Possibly,
loss in
but
Indiana.
I think
big
that
loss of the Republican Party for the presidential election.
look at
but
Mitch Daniels. Mitch Daniels did so well in Indiana, and then McCain was not able to ride those coattails. But Mitch Daniels is a fairly compelling guy, and I'm not sure
Paul
what
Ryan,
kind of
congressman from Wisconsin. Do you think so?
Paul Ryan
Very
got a
attractive.
boost recently from the Wall Street Journal. I think he's an idea leader. He's somebody who will come out with more and more ideas. But it's tough to go from congressperson to national contender.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be tough to go from state senator to president. Obama did it. Why can't this guy Ryan do it?
Well, Obama, by 2004, had an identified sort of coterie of supporters with considerable amount of money, and Obama is a pretty rare breed. I mean, there aren't a lot of Barack Obamas out there. We're talking
Huckabee, Romney, are they in there in 2012?
My suspicion is that they are. My suspicion is that they're going to go, and I was a
Lindsey
Romney
Graham,
supporter last
former
time.
McCain supporter, is he?
I
nothing?
doubt it.
Okay.
I mean, no reason for him not to, but
Let's
I
go
doubt,
on to something really
I
interesting.
doubt he would want to after
the death
seeing
of
it.
the state GOP.
Oh, yes.
Shall we say a few? What do we say? A requiem? What do we call it?
Well, I hope
say
that
here?
I hope we're going to have a revival of the state GOP.
Resurrection.
I'd love to see that.
Whenever there is death,
I would-
if you
I
believe
would-
in redemption, there is resurrection.
You know, Jeff,
This is your religious program this week.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm
Revival
just talking
hour.
about the
We had
Republican.
the revival. What was that? A Pentecostal revival? Oh, that was the Alan Keyes campaign, 2004, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
not
okay.
much.
This is a different
missed.
revival you're talking about. Okay.
I think the Republican Party of Illinois might come back. I hope it comes back. There are a lot of us who want to see it come back. It has a statutory requirement to come back because it has a statutory obligation in exchange for its position on the ballot.
Okay, now the reason we say it's dead is because in 1998 it elected a premier conservative as U.S. Senator, Peter Fitzgerald.
No, that's not why I say it's
No,
dead.
but that
I
was,
say it's
that was
dead
the
because
peak.
it hasn't won any elections.
Right, but since 98,
'Cause it's shrinking.
Right, and at the same time in 98, it lost the comptroller's seat it held. It lost the Secretary of State. In 2002, it lost the gubernatorial seat. It lost the lieutenant governor's
You
seat.
keep
It
going
lost
and I'll
attorney
start
general,
crying. I'll need a hanky.
leaving only Judy Bartopinka.
Right. She
And then
was
in
the
2004, we had a
treasurer.
joke of an election when Alan Keyes was the Republican nominee. He helped make
That was
Barack
an
Obama
enormous
president.
that was a credibility-reducing event.
Okay. And then since we've lost 3 congressional seats, I shouldn't say we because I'm fair and balanced. I used to be a Republican, I have to admit to that, but no more.
Okay.
Okay, so you Republicans lost
yes.
3 congressional seats, so now
It wasn't me personally.
it was 10-9 for Republicans in Illinois, now it's 12-7
know.
against Republicans. But in the State House, it's now something like 70-48.
It's not good.
3 more seats were
Not
lost.
good, yeah.
Tom Cross stays there in it forever because they don't have anybody else. So
Wait,
he
wait,
stays the minority
no,
leader.
I'm not agreeing with that by now.
Of course he
May
is.
I,
He's
may
nodding
I, may
off.
I speak to that? May I speak to
Yes.
that?
Tell me why Tom Cross
to
keeps
what may I
losing
speak?
seats. Tell me why Tom Cross stays there even though the Republican minority keeps getting to be a larger minority.
Well,
that is a smaller number
a
of people.
smaller minority. I think that what you're looking at with Tom Cross has got the support of his members, and even though there are fewer and fewer of his members, they still support Tom, and that's really a decision that only they can make. But let me talk.
Do you agree with that?
I don't. I'm not a member. I'm not one of them.
Is
and
it
I
good
have
for
no-
the Republican Party that
I
they
think
continue
Tom-
to lose and they don't make change in
Tom-
leadership?
I think there are other fish to fry. Tom Cross is a terrific
Give me some fish to fry.
state representative
Give me some
leader.
fish to fry.
We have to stand for something. We cannot be.
Republicans.
We
When you say we,
we
you
have
mean
to be
you.
a choice, not an echo. We cannot just be watered down Democrats. We cannot just say, "Oh well, we'll get to our own deal with the established
Tom
order."
tells you, he was, look, I was on a radio program and Tom gets so upset he called in Because when I said you don't stand for anything, he said, oh, of course we do. We've got these 7 little things. He didn't say little, but 7 things: property tax release, this, a capital plan. It was all nonsense because nobody would understand that as standing for anything. So, Chris Robling, what should Tom Cross say when he says the Republican Party stands for something?
Well, I think all Illinois Republicans should stand for responsive government that is being operated at some level of efficiency that reflects what we're doing in our private lives.
Give me something to rouse the faithful.
Oh,
I
think that we should stand up against any tax increase for, I don't know, the next 4 years or the next 6 years.
No more tax increases. Give me something else to energize and excite the Republican Party and independents. Give me something.
I think that the state of Illinois, I think we've got to go in and reform the state of Illinois because these bureaucracies are just wasting money in every direction. Okay. What we have got going on in Illinois is a continuous sort of expenditure of public dollars, and no one has any idea what the benefits are that are coming back.
So that would include education should be reformed, or should we just support spending more and more?
I think in the state of Illinois...
Take education, though. Is that important?
In the state of Illinois, education is hugely important. Healthcare is hugely important.
How do you reform education?
Transportation is hugely important.
Take it one by one, real quick.
Education, I think that we need to have a very significant commitment to vouchers. We've got to get a very significant commitment to parental choice.
Because why?
Because the established structures, such as they are, in this case, you're talking about education, primary, secondary education, the established structures of the Chicago public schools and a lot of the public schools around the state are simply not performing for the kids who are in those school systems.
And so why would vouchers help them perform?
Because the vouchers create market accountability for the school by giving the parents choice about where to send their kids.
And when they have choice, it means there's competition.
Exactly.
Without competition, there's no choice.
What we have now is
monopoly.
What we have right now
is monopoly.
We have a kind of a let's say competition light with a small degree of support for charter schools. Charter schools are sort of a begrudged concession of the established
long waiting
order.
list to get into charter schools?
Because
the legislature caps the number of charter schools.
Because the teacher unions want the number of charter schools capped, et cetera, et cetera. What you need
Does Tom Cross, support school vouchers? Because he doesn't support school vouchers.
Tom Cross
you couldn't find. No, I'm picking on Tom.
I'm not here to pick on Tom.
You would have trouble finding a half a dozen Republicans in the State House who support vouchers. Tom, I'm only picking on because he's a leader and I know he won't.
Okay.
But my point is you don't have any Republicans who support these things. So you can't argue for choice because they don't support choice.
Well, I think that there are a lot of Republicans in the rank and file out there who do support a ban on increased taxes, who do support reform of government bureaucracies, who do support things like choice in education. And I think that these...
You think a lot of people who are in the Republican Party, who are in the State House, support school vouchers?
I think there are some.
Can you name two?
I'm not saying that there are a lot.
Okay.
But I think that that's illustrative of the disjunction. Okay, this is exactly the problem. We've got a ferment of Republican, or let's say right of center, or market-oriented ideas.
You and Dan Proft, you got 2 Republicans out there. You're making it sound like there are 120 legislators who are behind you.
I think
this is the problem. You have a lot of spineless legislators who have no philosophy, who have no thought, and then they say they can't understand why they can't challenge anybody.
This is your word. It is not my word. My word is involvement. And if people don't get involved in their local Republican Party, then the results that you see, and wherever you decide to look, whether it's the county board or the General Assembly or the city council of the city of Chicago, you're going to see results that are not to your liking.
Yeah. You were on a program, you appear often on Chicago Tonight, at least sometimes, WTTW, that hosted by Carol Maureen. You were there with Tom Cross. You were there with Judy Bartopinka.
Tom Cross, that's right.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago.
And Judy says, the problem with the Republican Party is we need more moderates because they can win. And nobody, Cross didn't, you didn't, Maureen didn't, say to Judy, hey Judy, you're a moderate and you ran in 2006 and you got 40% of the vote. Yeah. How's come?
Here's what I said. I said we need a tent that is open to everybody who identifies themselves as Republicans, and only when everybody is welcomed. Judy got into a statement. Judy said, I, Judy Bartopinka, sometimes feel like an endangered species. Yeah. And I said, the Judy Bartopinka should never feel that way. No one in the Republican constellation should ever feel that way.
She was a terrible candidate, and nobody said that. Wasn't she a terrible candidate?
No, I think that Judy was a fine candidate.
Did she have ideas? What were those ideas?
I think she had a couple of good ideas. It was not her year. I'm not going to get into looking backward and personal attacks, whether it's Tom Cross or Judy Bart-Topinka, two people that I,
Try Andy McKenna. You want him out as state GOP chairman.
But I don't say anything nasty about him personally. He's the greatest guy in the world.
Why do you want him out?
He's ineffective.
Okay. And why is he still there after 4 years?
We have a supine party organization. I mean, what else can you say about a party that allowed Bob Shalander to stay in office as our national committeeman? I mean, this is all sort of internal dirty laundry that, Bob Shalander is an obscure guy.
We have to go on. So the short of it is the way out for the state GOP is reform.
I think the way out for Illinois, I mean, look, we are facing a seizing up, to use that phrase again, of all of the functions of Illinois government. And what we need in Illinois and Illinois government are some fresh ideas. We are not getting them from the Democrats who control everything in Springfield.
The Illinois Policy Institute, John Tillman is the new CEO. You know him?
I think, yes, I do, and I think that they're doing great work.
They should be the think tank on which the Republican Party relies for their ideas.
Well, I think that they're one, but there are think tanks all across the country.
The Heartland Institute is another one, right?
The Heartland Institute.
But I'm here locally in Illinois, but
there are a lot of different sources of great ideas.
Right. Okay.
And we've got to bring those into our
national GOP. The same thing. Has it died? Look,
the national GOP has got
how many electoral votes did Barack get? Something like 364, and we're still counting.
370 or something.
We don't know Missouri yet.
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
tremendous. But
there was only a 4-point shift from 2004 to 2008. I think we went down 2.6 points, and the Democrats went up 1.3 points.
53 to 46 is the 53% for Obama, 46 for McCain. That's a pretty good margin. 364 electoral votes, 263 for McCain. 57 Democratic senators. It could be 60 when the next three get resolved. Could be a filibuster-proof Senate. 256 to 175. That's Democrats to Republicans in the House. The leader stays the same. John Boehner is still going to be the minority leader. My God, how bad a failure do you have to for them to say away with Mr. Boehner?
Well, you've got to ask somebody like some serving member like Judy Biggert. I personally, I would love to see completely new leadership in Washington, in the House and in the Senate on the Republican side. I think that we should start over. I think that the Republicans in Washington have a very special obligation to the country right now to define loyal opposition, to identify the areas where they're prepared to work with President-elect Obama, and to work on those areas, and in areas where he goes beyond what he said in the campaign, where he goes, I don't think he has any sort of mandate to move the country to the left, but that is the way that Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid will interpret the results of the election.
Before we go left, you knew Barack Obama. You've been here in Illinois. Would you say you knew him?
Oh, very remotely, yeah.
Yeah, well, you got a chance to observe him. You had a chance to observe him.
That's right.
What makes Barack Obama run? What makes him tick?
Well, I think he's a very smart guy, and I think that he's very ambitious. And he has done a terrific job of showing up in Chicago in 1986 or something, and not knowing really, I think he knew Jerry Kellman or just a few people. And
he was 84 to 88 as a community organizer. Out to Harvard Law, then back again to Chicago in 91.
And elected
the state Senate.
He shows up in the 1980s in Chicago, not knowing a soul, and by 2004 he's a United States senator, and now it's 2008 he's president-elect.
He's a quick study. He's very likable.
He's a very likable guy
in politics.
He's a very likable guy.
You would know because you were a politician in a sense. You were a City of Chicago elections commissioner?
I was a commissioner of elections.
I
was actually kind of not a politician. I was the counter
executive director of the Cook County GOP.
Yes, that's true.
You know government, CTA, communications director?
Actually, I was communications director of the RTA.
Excuse me, RTA. Okay.
Thank you.
But so you've been in government, you've
Yes.
been in the media, you've been at WBEZ, a bastion of liberalism, right?
That's right.
And you were the conservative? Were you the token conservative?
I'm still not sure what I was.
Are you the
when I was
token
there.
conservative when you appear on TTW?
On Channel 9, I'm the Republican guy. Okay. But I will tell you, Barack Obama did a great job of putting together support, and you gotta hand that to him. There's a lot more to be said about him. I think that we know him better because we're from Illinois, and we saw him rise, and we know the difference between the Barack Obama who was rising in Illinois and the Barack Obama who was
the three amigos
depicted in the campaign.
Rahm Emanuel, now his chief of staff, right?
Yes, David Axelrod.
David Axelrod to be his
senior strategist.
His Karl Rove.
Something like that.
They used to say Rove was Bush's brain, obviously Obama has a brain. People weren't so sure about Bush.
Bush has
so
a
they
brain,
would
too.
say this is the second brain that he has. He's got two brains, his own and he's got Rove.
Yeah.
And Forrest Claypool, Cook County Commissioner, all related, all involved with AKP Media. Those were the three amigos.
Right.
Maybe Claypool will emerge with a position, move up from Cook County Commissioner. Maybe he will run for Emmanuel seat.
Possible. Possible.
The fourth amigo was Barack Obama. So it's a very local group that's emerged
Well,
now
this
for
is-
the presidency.
This is a huge event for Chicago, and it's a huge event for Mayor Daley. It's something that has changed the landscape in Illinois. I mean, Mayor Daley has, if anything, considerably more clout today than he did 6 weeks ago.
Right.
And so you are looking at obviously we've all talked about the Olympics, but there are a lot of issues beyond that. You mentioned RTA and CTA. It related to the Olympics and related to the needs of the region. I think we're going to see a lot more funding for CTA and perhaps even Metra, thanks to President Obama.
Okay, so who does Rod Blagojevich appoint to replace Barack Obama as the junior senator from the state of Illinois?
You know, it is very tough. I guess
Give me two names.
it's a shot
Give
in
me
the
two
dark.
names.
I think Jesse Jackson Jr. has to be considered a strong possibility. I
Good
don't
friend.
Think I think
Also, has known Blagojevich off and on.
well, I mean,
Might help
he's
him.
from the south side of the
it'd
city
help
of
him with
Chicago.
help Blagojevich with his African American base.
I mean,
appoints him as African
I
American.
think he proceeds out of there with some peril. I think then the other one that you've got to look at is Lisa Madigan on this theory that
Get rid of her.
It sort of promotes her off to Washington.
Or Valerie Jarrett, possibility.
Valerie Jarrett would make an outstanding United States Senator. I know that because I worked with her on CTA matters.
Would
when I was
appointing
at RTA.
Jackson, Jarrett, Madigan, would it help Rod Blagojevich get rid of Patrick Fitzgerald? You understand how that deal works?
I think, maybe a contrarian, but I suspect we're going to see Rod Blagojevich, and I hope I am not proven wrong on this. I think we'll see Barack Obama leave Fitzgerald there for the time being.
For how long? Long enough
Through
to
an
long
indictment
enough
of
to
Rod
indict.
Blagojevich.
Okay, that's your prediction. Rod gets indicted?
I think that.
Is that your prediction? Rod gets indicted?
Well, who knows? I just read the papers like everybody else. But I think that there is a reason to think, I think there are a lot of good political reasons to think that Obama does just fine as president having an active prosecutor back here in Chicago.
Keeps the Democrats in line here.
I think that,
It helps his image. He actually is a reformer.
Well, it is something. I think he wants to see vigorous prosecutions around the country.
We're gonna continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest Chris Robling, who, as we build, and I think as we've shown, he is a star in politics. He's a star in PR.
I don't know about
He is a star as a pundit. All right, so truly, he does a lot. He's with the principal. He's a principal at Jane Thompson Associates. They do litigation support and crisis management, would you say?
That's right.
So you combine all this stuff.
But
Punditry,
to the extent requested,
government,
that's right. That's
media.
Right. Yeah. We try to help out.
Somebody's got a reputation problem, you maintain it, you extend it, you grow it.
We get involved and work with them to help them in their situation.
All right, so let's look further at this cabinet treasury picks for Barack Obama, Larry Summers.
I think that he's got to pick somebody who's instantly credible throughout the entire world, and that means he's got about 4 or 5. I think that Larry Summers is a very strong possibility.
Secretary of State, John Kerry, Bill Richardson, Hillary Clinton.
I would much rather see him go in the direction of Hillary Clinton than either of the others. I can tell you that.
You'd be comfortable with Hillary Clinton?
I'd
as
be
your
much more
Secretary of State?
comfortable. I'd be much more comfortable because I think that Hillary Clinton has a phenomenal understanding of what it takes to maintain the independence and integrity of Israel in this Middle Eastern situation. I'm not at all ready to rely on John Kerry or Bill Richardson. I think that Hillary's in a different category with respect to the Middle East than they are.
Media bias. Was the media in the tank for Barack Obama? Is that one of the reasons why he won?
Yes, no
in
question.
Chicago, a lot of media bias. Would you say public TV? You know something about public TV and TTW. Would you say they're biased to the left?
Well, PBS, I think that.
What about the local station, TTW?
No, I think they do a pretty good job. They try to stay. They try to report
Is there anybody
accurately.
in there who works for them, TTW, on TV, that is a concern?